Welcome to Washington Hospital Today, dedicated to informing residents about healthcare topics and issues. Through programs featuring community forums and free health and wellness classes, our goal is to empower community members with the information needed to make informed health decisions. Washington Hospital has been providing healthcare to the residents of the Washington Township Healthcare District for the past 60 years. Today's presenter is Anna Mazzei. Anna is a clinical registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator.
Welcome to Diabetes Matters. We're celebrating American Heart Month, and it's interesting that this all started, you may not know this is just a bit of FYI, is that it was President Lyndon Johnson in 1964 who proclaimed that February would be American Heart Month. And that was 9 years after he had a heart attack. Okay. And he urged the people of the United States to give heed to the nationwide problem of the heart and blood vessel diseases and to support the programs required to bring about the solution. Because despite all the, hubbub about COVID, heart disease is still the number one cause of death in the States. Okay. And that's really important for diabetes because we always say in our classes that poorly controlled blood sugar is the concern. If you have well-controlled blood sugar, it's the cause of nothing. Okay, so if blood sugars are poorly controlled, there is an increased risk for heart disease, okay? And again, this is what we don't want to have happen is the blocking of the arteries from plaque buildup. And actually there are glucose circulating through the blood has chemical reactions with other compounds. And so it ends up being even more dangerous, the compounds that it turns into in terms of vascular health. Okay. They're called advanced end stage products from glucose. So it's really important for people with diabetes to manage their ABCs. So we always say that in classes to keep your A1C less than 7%, because when it gets above 7%, you're increasing your risk, and keeping the blood pressure definitely down below 140 over 90. And of course, cholesterol, they're looking at the LDL cholesterol, less than 100. Now, goals are different for different people because the physician has to look at your age, other medical problems, medications that you're on, to determine what your goals should be for A1C, blood pressure, and cholesterol also, okay? All right, so let's start with looking at the changes that people can make. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed with, a condition they have. Somebody might have heart disease and diabetes, and they feel like, what can I do? Clearly, on the left-hand side, you can see all the modifiable risk factors that are in your control, which is not to say changes are not hard to make, but they are in your control. There's less risk factors that are not in your control, okay? So we're gonna really focus in tonight on, of course, aspects related to healthy eating and how that impacts blood pressure, weight, and cholesterol levels, okay? So let's first jump into cholesterol. Okay, well, let me tell you, it is a fat-like waxy substance. It's produced by the liver and the intestines. Okay, and the body makes about 80% of the cholesterol circulating in our body. 20% of it comes from foods that have cholesterol. Okay, now if you notice the foods that are shown there are milk, eggs, cheese, meat. Those are animal products because only animals have a liver that can make cholesterol. Okay, now why does any animal's body make cholesterol? Well, it does have many functions in the body. Okay, it goes to make all the cell walls, and we have trillions of cells, and it maintains the content of the cell. So all the ingredients of the cell can stay in because of the membrane that's there, and that's what cholesterol is made for. It also is a forerunner to all the five major classes of steroids in our bodies. That includes like estrogen. It's also a component of the natural vitamin D that our body makes. And it goes to make bile acids, which are produced by the liver, and bile acid is important for digesting fats. Okay. So you can see the test tube on the right-hand side there is somebody who has high cholesterol. So it does look kind of waxy and fatty. Okay. So when they process your blood to look at how much cholesterol you have, they spin it and it separates out the fats and cholesterol. Okay. So as we know, we need a certain amount of cholesterol in our body. We don't need a dietary source because our liver is very competent at doing it to do all those functions I just mentioned. But of course, when you get a high concentration, this is the problem: is that the arteries become blocked, are thickened, and then blood flow may be impaired. And you need blood circulating through all the body parts to nourish tissue. So once blood flow is blocked, that's when tissue dies. And that's what happens in a heart attack or stroke. Okay. So when you get your blood levels checked, they're looking mostly, a routine blood cholesterol check looks at these four components: the HDL, LDL, triglycerides, and total cholesterol. So these are general goals, but of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, the physician might have different goals for you. All right. So people who typically have diagnosed heart disease, they really want that LDL cholesterol, that's a focus there, to be less than 70. For people at high risk of heart disease, like people with diabetes, they want it less than 100. And for other people, it's acceptable to be less than 130. Okay. Now I just had a patient today who's, I think maybe in her 30s, whose LDL cholesterol, she has no other medical problems. It was 181. Okay. So the doctor referred her to us to have a diet on how to lower her intake, but she has no other medical problems, but it's that high LDL cholesterol. Okay. So when they look at the total cholesterol, like if you go to a health fair or that type of thing, they'll give you the total cholesterol level, and we want that less than 200. Okay. All right. So that was a routine test, but some people may need to look, they can look at more details of the different kinds of cholesterol or lipids. We call these blood fats lipids. So somebody the doctor might have to take a harder look at the different components to determine what kind of treatment they need. Okay. So some people who might benefit from this are people who are at great risk. So somebody with diabetes, the physician might recommend them to have a VAP testing, which is a more intense look at the different blood components of cholesterol. Okay. All right. So let's get to talking about the focus for the Heart Association and many other scientific associations. The focus is really on reducing LDL cholesterol. So L stands for lousy, and you want it low because it's depositing cholesterol on the artery wall. So the HDL is healthy and we want that high, but it is difficult to increase HDL levels without medications. So the focus is again on looking at the dietary components that will help us to reduce the LDL cholesterol. Okay. So let's start with looking at trans fats. So trans fats are something that are really mostly, they do occur in nature in animal products, but that's not where most people get the trans fats from. It's from PHOs, partially hydrogenated oils. So I'm saying that they are our foe because these are the worst types of fats for anybody to eat because they increase the LDL, the lousy one, and they decrease the HDL, going in the exact opposite direction we want people's cholesterol to go in. Okay, so why were they ever produced? Because they've been in the marketplace for some time. They're inexpensive, okay, and they're easy to use in products. They have a long shelf life. They give foods a desirable taste and texture. And in restaurants, they use them for frying because the fat can be used over and over again, okay? But in the 2015, the Food and Drug Administration took them off their what we call GRAS list, generally recognized as safe. So they were removed from the GRAS list. And at that time, they told food manufacturers that it was in June of 2018, that manufacturers could not use any more partially hydrogenated oils to the foods. And we're still waiting for the products that they made in 2018 to get through the marketplace. So you still might see them out there, but more and more food manufacturers are not using the partially hydrogenated oils. otherwise known as shortening. Crisco is the major brand of shortening. Really saturated or hydrogenated stick margarine. And you may not have used these at home, but they're in a lot of baked goods and snack foods. Okay. So this is the kind of foods that you might see that have partially hydrogenated oils, microwave popcorn, movie style microwave popcorn, that type of thing. Okay. So when you look at a food label, if a product says it's trans fat free, it just has to have less than a half a gram of fat. But if you look at the ingredient list over here, it says partially hydrogenated soybean and cottonseed oil. So if you start having more than one serving, it's going to start adding up. And really, the Heart Association says they want people to have no amount of trans fats. Okay, they have no benefit to our diets at all. So the next thing we look at is saturated fat, removing saturated fat from the diet to lower cholesterol. Okay, so when they take oil and harden it, they're making it into a saturated fat, but they're also creating these trans fats. So those hydrogenated oils will also have saturated fat. But saturated fat also is a major contributor to increasing LDL cholesterol. And you find that in animal products along with cholesterol. Like we just said, if you look at that piece of ribeye right there, that has cholesterol in the actual meat, but the saturated fat, as you can see, is that white marbling, which makes the meat very tasty. Okay. But in general, the Heart Association wants people to have probably less than 6% of their calories coming from saturated fat. So for somebody on a 2,000 calorie a day diet, that's going to end up being like maybe around 10 grams of saturated fat. Okay. Somewhere along the lines of maybe 11 to 13 grams of saturated fat. So you could see how easily it adds up. Let's say you put a pat, which is a teaspoon of butter, on that muffin from Starbucks. That's already 6. And as I said, if somebody wants only 6% of their calories coming from saturated fat, that's only about 10 grams in the day. So that's right, 6 right there at breakfast. Okay, then you might have a snack of string cheese. It's supposed to be low fat. So that's another 3. Okay, so that's 9 now. You're getting close. So if you have a teaspoon of coconut oil somewhere at dinner time, that's 4 grams. So you're over the amount that you should have in the day. So it easily adds up with some foods that are really concentrated, of course, in saturated fat. As you can see, you can tell the saturated fat because that's what is marbled into meat, and that's what makes it juicy. Okay. So this is 1 slice of pizza, 5 grams of saturated fat. Of course, that's 1 slice. If you have 2, you've just topped it off for the day. All right. So be mindful and check out the labels for the saturated fat. So how to reduce saturated fat in the diet is to consistently select lean sources of protein. So one way is to consistently select skinless poultry products like skinless chicken breast. Now, you can cook with the skin on to keep some of the moisture, but then it's recommended not to eat the skin. And looking for the leanest fat-free even ground poultry, because sometimes they'll put a lot of the skin back into the ground meat to make it taste rich. The Heart Association also recommends at least 2 fish meals a week. And there I've noted the fattier fish that contain healthy oils, which we'll talk about in a minute. And there's really a push to going to more plant-based proteins as listed here. And if you do select lean red meats, you want to look at the lean cuts, which are usually described as loin, sirloin, or round cuts. And there are grades of meat called choice, select, and prime. So actually prime should also be in quotes there. So prime is a higher grade of meat, and it is richer tasting, and it is more expensive. The grades of meat like choice and select are less expensive, and they are leaner typically. And of course, the other thing too is you want to trim off any visible fat and keep to a small portion, which is a 3-ounce cooked portion, which is the size and thickness of a deck of cards. Okay. With dairy products, you want to at least go to a 1% milk and yogurt. And as much as you can, try to get a lower fat cheese and use small amounts. Usually grating the cheese can spread it out so it goes further. So the type of fats you want to use are unsaturated fats. These do not promote high LDL cholesterol. So we have a mixture of poly and monounsaturated fats here. So it's encouraged to use a variety. You don't have to stick with one. Maybe you may be getting soybean in oil in some products you buy from the store. So maybe at home you use olive oil on your salad, that type of thing. So what I wanted to mention is that all these fats are the same calories. So even though nuts are nutritious and olive oil has heart healthy fats in it, and same with avocados, be mindful about how many nuts you have or guacamole, because the calories can still add up and promote weight gain. So going back to the omega-3 fatty acids that are in the fish that I listed before, again, the Heart Association recommends at least 2 fish meals a week, and focusing on those that have those omega-3 fatty acids. So those fish oils are not necessarily known to lower your cholesterol, but they do have a cardioprotective effect in different ways. You know, when your arteries are injured, inflammation starts there. So you want to reduce the inflammation. That's what some of those omega-3 fatty acids do. They can prevent your heart from going into a dangerous heart rhythm. They also can reduce the risk of blood clots. So they work in other ways to be cardioprotective. And some physicians might prescribe high levels of actually prescription fish oils to help lower triglycerides, which are another type of blood fat that I mentioned earlier. So let's take a look next at something different than fats that can help lower cholesterol. So you might have heard of soluble fiber or fiber in general, but there's really 2 types that people talk about, soluble and insoluble fiber. So insoluble fiber for years has been promoted to help with regularity. And so that speeds up, to help with constipation. So in your intestinal tract, it helps to speed up foods moving through to help with that. And foods like bran are all bran. Bran is also in whole wheat products. So it adds bulk and helps promote bowel movements. Soluble fiber acts like a gel, and it can slow digestion so that it keeps you feeling fuller longer. And the nature of this type of fiber also traps cholesterol in the intestinal tract and helps remove it that way. Both of these are not broken down to promote blood sugar. They are a type of carbohydrate, but it's a type of carbohydrate that doesn't break down. So it's not going to contribute to glucose. Okay. And it can aid in insulin response also. So insulin works better. So let's take a look at foods that do contain insoluble fiber. So as I mentioned, like this is puffed wheat. These are lentils, 100% whole wheat bread. And some foods have a little bit of each, or maybe they fall into 2 types of fibers. So apples I've seen on lists of soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And these are popular soluble fiber foods. So barley, oats, you can see when you make oatmeal that it gets a very sticky, almost like glue. And that's that gummy fiber that when you ingest it traps the cholesterol in your intestinal tract. Barley is the same way. Kidney beans and prunes, of course, are known also to help with regularity. Let's see how much you're supposed to have in the day. It's recommended to try to get to 5 to 10 grams of soluble fiber a day, because that may help to lower cholesterol by 5 to 11 points. So this is how you could get up to about 10 grams a day. If you had a cup of cooked oats, small apple in there, and a tablespoon of flaxseed powder or ground flax seeds, that's going to give you 4 grams right there at breakfast and probably stay with you quite a bit of the morning. Then at lunch, maybe you throw some kidney beans onto a salad. I mean, of course, you could still have chicken in a sandwich there if you wanted to, but this is how you would get meet the fiber goal. Half a cup of kidney beans, maybe a pear, maybe you snack on some carrots in the afternoon, and that's going to add up to 4 grams. And then a cup of barley at night. Maybe some people don't think about having barley instead of white rice or other types of grains. And barley acts just like oatmeal. So, there's barley pilaf, there's barley soup. There's a lot of ways to incorporate that. And some people don't think of that as a grain that they or if you ever consider it. But that's how you would add up to about 10 grams of soluble fiber in the day. Okay. So let's go into talking a little bit about sodium now, because most people recognize the concern with sodium and the concern with its effect on blood pressure. But sodium has many functions in foods and in our body, and then there's sodium dysfunction. Okay, so sodium, of course, adds flavor to food, and it's a learned taste. So, imagine kids who grow up eating a lot of fast foods or, instant noodles and things like that. The sodium is going to add up quickly and they're going to get used to that flavor. So, it's important to not introduce young kids to high levels of sodium. So you can unlearn your taste though for salt. It also, of course, acts as a preservative. For years, many people depended on salt to preserve food when they didn't have refrigeration. Now we have refrigeration, but we still eat things like pickles and olives and things like that that are high in sodium because they're cured in that. And it acts as a binder and stabilizer in the food industry. So it has functional properties used in the food manufacturing industry. And in our body, it is an electrolyte. So it plays a role in helping our muscles and nerves contract and relax. And it's important for proper fluid balance. But of course, we know that it can attract fluid to the body in an unnecessary way, and that contributes to high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. Okay. They have found that actually sodium itself, outside of attracting the fluid to the body, can be a direct irritant to those organs and even to the stomach, and increased risk for stomach cancer. And when you have a high sodium diet, it leaches calcium from the bone. So those are some other concerns outside of high blood pressure that we're concerned about with sodium intake. So the minimum requirement is only about 500 milligrams a day under normal circumstances, not extreme heat. The average person, it takes in over 3,400 milligrams a day. The recommendation from the heart in general is for people to go less than 2,300 a day, but the Heart Association is really promoting less than 1,500, which is pretty strict because that means really cooking all foods from fresh ingredients at home. Okay. So about 3,400 milligrams is what's in about a teaspoon and a half of salt. Let's take a look at the next slide because I think I have an example of that. So as I was mentioning, when you look at sodium attracting fluid to the system, the problem is that when your body is pumping the blood all day long, day in and day out for years, what happens is that depending on the strength of the pressure, if it's high pressure, it's going to keep damaging the wall. There's going to be injury to the wall, and from that, plaque can start to build up. But also the walls get stiffened, they get thick and stiffened, and that increases blood pressure further. Okay, so we want our blood vessels to be supple and to not be stiff, and that's what happens when over time with high blood pressure. And again, as I mentioned, there's actually micro injuries to the lining of the arteries, and that's where plaque starts to build up too. And the Heart Association, if you go to this website, they actually have sort of a visual idea of what's going on with the blood vessels as they pump, as your heart pumps blood through the day. It's kind of an interesting video of it. Okay. All right. So let's look at sources of sodium in our diet. Okay. Only 5% really comes from home cooking. You're getting most of it from processed and prepared foods. Only 12% from, foods like fresh foods, chicken, fish, fresh vegetables, that type of thing. Now, if you look at teaspoons over here, a teaspoon of salt already has 2,400 milligrams of sodium. All right. So if a recipe calls for a teaspoon of sodium, like a pot of soup, thankfully, you're going to be splitting that up with other people and eating it over a few days. But you can see that it can add up very quickly in the next slide. When you read sodium on food labels, the sodium they're measuring is all compounds with sodium. So sodium in our foods doesn't just come from salt, it comes from other compounds. Okay, so sodium chloride is in Himalayan pink salt, it's in Hawaiian black salt, it's in gray Celtic sea salt, and in kosher salt. They're all about the same. The difference is in some of these flavors because they have other minerals, but they all are sodium chloride. Okay, so sodium also comes in the form of sodium nitrate in processed meats. And in baked goods, you're going to get it from sodium bicarbonate, which is in baking soda and baking powder. And in breads and bread products, they might use sodium propionate because it retards mold buildup in bread. And of course, monosodium glutamate is used in Asian restaurants and Asian foods much of the time. Okay, so food manufacturers measure all sources of sodium to give you the amount on the label when you look at the nutrition facts. All right, like this. So in this case, this says light in sodium. The serving size is 1 cup, and that's 380 milligrams of sodium. And as you can see here, there's sodium citrate and there's sea salt in it, and that's where that sodium is coming from. So the nutrition information here is always for the 1 serving size described by the manufacturer. All right. So this product says light in sodium. So that's not too bad. That's 16% of the recommended 2,400 a day. You typically want something that's less than 20% for sure. All right. So let's take a look at the sodium content of different foods. So fresh foods, as I mentioned, here's this apple, only 2 milligrams. You look at a chicken breast, 84. You look at just boiled egg noodles, 8. A cucumber's 0. Fresh corn, 23. But once we take the cucumber and make it into a pickle, which is just almost like a condiment, it's something to eat on the side of your sandwich, it's almost 1,200 milligrams of sodium, half of what's recommended for just the pickle. Okay, and if you look at bread, it starts to add up a little bit, maybe because of, like I said, that sodium propionate or maybe salt that was added for flavoring. Potato chips, that's not so bad, but of course things start to add up. You have 2 pieces of bread and a small bag of potato chips. You're getting quite a bit there. That doesn't even include the meat that might be in it, like a hot dog in a bun. Okay, the chicken is only 84 milligrams of sodium, but once you make it into a chicken hot dog and process it, it jumps up. So again, boiled noodles only 8, but instant noodles jumps up to almost 700. And when you look at canned corn, again, canned foods are going to be high in salt, and actually frozen vegetables are typically not high in salt. And 1 tablespoon of soy sauce is almost 900 milligrams. That's just a seasoning agent, not even something you're eating. That's contributing to quite a bit to the sodium allowance in the day. The light soy sauce is about 500 milligrams. And there we go, a teaspoon of salt is 2,300 milligrams, about, which I just showed you. Okay. So here are some strategies to reduce sodium intake. Try to focus in only on fresh foods. And you know, many of the grocery stores now, I think, are really trying to do that. They're offering fast, fresh foods. They're having vegetables cleaned in microwavable bags. They have salad kits for you. They have cut up vegetables ready to go in, like with a little dip or something. So they're making it really easy for people to select more fresh foods and less processed foods. The other thing too is to obviously limit canned foods, soups, frozen meals, and packaged dried foods, you know, things like Top Ramen, cup of noodle, Kraft macaroni and cheese. Those things are going to be where are concentrated in one source of sodium or another. Cured foods that we talked about, things like pickles, ham, bacon. In cooking, try to only use 1 ingredient with sodium or salt. So for example, if you're stir frying, maybe you want the flavor of soy sauce, but then try not to use any other ingredient with salt, like garlic salt or fish sauce. Try to use the fresh ingredients, fresh garlic, fresh onion, sesame seed oil, which has a lot of flavor, and you only need a small amount of it. Ginger, those kinds of things are what we typically associate with Asian flavors, and using maybe the light soy. The other ingredients that can add, I think, a punch to foods without adding salt are things like citrus, like lemon and lime, and different vinegars. They give food, I think, that tanginess, and of course, herbs and spices like cilantro, basil. They give you a whole new level of flavor when you add those, like at the end of cooking. At restaurants, this is where you're going to get a lot of sodium, and the best thing you can do is maybe ask for no salt to be added to your food, but it's difficult because they might have put a rub already on the food. Okay, for sure you don't want to ask for soup or sauces that were made already. They can't take the salt out of it. Additionally, you might want to order a lot of things on the side, like salad dressing, guacamole, and those things, so that you can control the amount of salt that might be in those onto your food. All right. The other thing we didn't mention is potassium plays a role in lowering blood pressure. So a high potassium diet helps to excrete sodium so that you'd be less likely to have fluid retention. And this is really what they found in something called the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension. They really found a blood pressure lowering in just 2 weeks, people following a diet that's higher in potassium. This diet, which was called, again, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, also included quite a bit of magnesium. And you get more potassium and magnesium through plant foods. All right. So let's take a look further at other diets that push for a more plant-based diet. So the dietary approaches to stop hypertension and the Mediterranean diet have been the two most popular diets in the last couple of years because they have obviously many health benefits, but they are not hard to follow. So, but they are very high in, the focus is plant-based. So if you look at grains, which is the one that says 6 to 8 servings per day, that is based on different levels, different calorie needs for people. So if you were only following a 1,200 calorie a day diet, you'd probably be at the lower end of the portions. So 6 servings of whole grains a day. Again, less processed grains have many benefits. One being they're less likely to spike blood sugar because they are less processed grains like brown rice versus white rice. And focusing in on quite a bit more fruits and vegetables in the day, 4 to 5 servings of vegetables per day. So a serving of vegetables could be a cup of raw vegetables or half cup cooked, and also looking at more fruit during the day. So people with diabetes might be concerned about having fruit, but again, what you want to do is space out your meals in the day and snacks so that each time you eat, you have recovery, blood sugar recovery from what you ate. So fruits can be incorporated as a snack. And again, there's a range based on somebody's calorie needs. So here they say 2 to 3 servings of fat-free or low-fat dairy products, okay, because there's benefits in having more calcium in the diet and whey protein, which is also in dairy products. If you go up here, it says 4 to 5 servings of nuts, seeds, and beans during the week, trying to incorporate those plant foods, and keeping to only 6 servings or 6 ounces of animal protein per day. And again, promoting more of the seafood and poultry. And they even allow for some sweets on the DASH diet, maybe 5 sweets per week, which could be like sherbet or sorbet, something of this nature. And again, you want to evaluate the effects on blood sugar there. Now, the difference, one of the main differences between the DASH diet and Mediterranean is on the Mediterranean diet, they do allow alcohol, typically 1 alcoholic beverage for a woman during the day and 2 for a man. That's considered moderate alcohol intake. But both have similar or similar otherwise. The other importance of having a plant-based diet are the phytochemicals that are offered. They found maybe 5,000 different phytochemicals in the diet that they're not nutrients that we depend on for, keeping us meeting our nutrient needs. Like you need a certain amount of vitamin C a day, a certain amount of B vitamins a day. Phytochemicals work differently in the way they prevent disease, okay? Referring to heart disease specifically, they can reduce blood pressure and they may help lower LDL cholesterol and help prevent LDL from getting oxidized because that's when it's the most damaging to the artery wall. And again, once you injure the artery wall, there's inflammation and thickening of the artery wall, and we don't want that. So in that way, these phytochemicals help reduce inflammation. Also, as I mentioned, the magnesium was a mineral that's high in the DASH diet, a Mediterranean diet, and it's critical for many bodily functions, including blood pressure regulation. But studies show that magnesium can help reduce blood pressure by increasing the production of nitric oxide. And that's a signaling molecule that helps relax blood vessels, and in that way, help to reduce blood pressure on the artery walls. Okay, so we can't not talk about weight management and its role in helping with blood glucose control, its role in reducing blood pressure, and its role in reducing all across the board blood fats. Okay, so talking about weight management is beyond the scope of tonight's talk, but I wanted to give you a few picks, so to speak. So in real estate, it's location, location, location. And with making dietary changes, it's planning, planning, planning. Nothing can happen without some kind of plan. It doesn't have to be a big plan, but maybe the start of changes, some kind of plan. So for example, buying your groceries once a week, planning and having the foods that you need available. Okay. Obviously, you want to remove tempting foods from your home and work environment as best as you can. Because if you have kids at home, there might be some of those high calorie foods available during the holidays. We know that's what happens. Foods that you wouldn't normally buy happen to be around, and that can lead to a weight gain that people complain about during those holiday months. Okay. The other thing you want to keep in mind, are you going too long without eating? When you go hours without eating a meal or a snack, there's a tendency to not just feel hungry, but to feel starved. And then you eat fast and you overeat. And then in about 20 minutes, you might not feel so comfortable because it takes that long for your stomach to tell your head, I think we're getting full. The other place where people may get excess unnecessary calories is by drinking high calorie beverages. So when you look at things, whole milk, or coffee with cream, specialty coffees from the Starbucks, Pete's, those places, they're almost become like a coffee milkshake when I've seen some of the frappuccinos and things like this. Okay. So juices from Jamba Juice and teas like that are high in sugar, those places that serve boba teas, they're basically sugar water with some flavoring. I don't know if anybody's aware of those new tea. There's many kinds of tea houses now that serve these sweet drinks that are flavored and they have tapioca balls in them. So I see a lot of kids going in there and drinking these. So they've gotten rid of, vending machines with soda in them at the school sites, but now kids are hanging out at coffee houses and tea houses and drinking these things. So when you drink your calories, it's not satisfying. And then it leads to and some of the calories in these drinks are the calories you need for a meal. It's nothing for a drink to offer maybe 400 calories, but it's not satisfying because you haven't had solid food or a nutritious meal. Okay. So in general, you want to look for calorie-free beverages, but mostly focus in on water. And of course, we've talked about avoiding high fat foods because that's where people can get excess calories, is by eating fried foods, whole fat dairy products. So be mindful of, you don't have to go fat free necessarily, but looking at, do I have high fat foods in my house? Am I using, full fat cream cheese? Can I go to a lighter one? Am I using regular mayonnaise? Could I just go to a lighter one? So, stepping down and experimenting with some of the lower fat foods. And of course, focusing in on portion control. And the first step to that is looking at the plate method. So that's a nice looking plate where you have close to half the plate full of vegetables and some fruit and a small amount of some brown rice. And of course, heart healthy salmon that's there on the plate. Okay. So I can't close the meeting tonight without talking about exercise as its role in overall health, because we know that any activity is going to help lower blood sugar. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full-blown exercise where your heart rate's getting up and you're sweating. It can be just trying to walk after a meal that's going to help to lower blood sugar. Okay. When you exercise and you are more active, you're going to maintain muscle mass. And when you really exercise those muscles, you're going to build on the muscle. And when your body is more working tissue like muscle, you're generally more likely to have help with lowering blood sugar, because muscle tissue is working tissue and it's going to need that fuel, that glucose. So being active also helps to strengthen bones because it stresses the bones. It helps with mental health. Of course, it helps with cardiovascular fitness, and it can lower different risk of other kinds of cancer. So the general recommendations that you've probably heard of is accumulating about 30 minutes a day. It doesn't need to be 30 minutes all at once, but accumulating 30 minutes a day so that you've gotten about averaging out about 150 minutes of moderate activity a week. So that's only 2.5 hours in the whole week we're suggesting for people. So again, it can be accumulating that throughout the day. Some people keep track of their steps. Maybe that's a good idea is to try to get to 4, maybe to 6,000 steps a day. You could also choose maybe not to do the 150, but do 75 minutes of vigorous activity during the week. That could replace the 150 minutes, or you could add to the 150 minutes. And again, to focus back on strength training and building muscle, looking at doing at least a couple of days a week of strength training. So that could be with exercising with weights. That could be increasing the incline on a treadmill. That could be yoga, or maybe spending time really lifting your groceries out of the car. So for example, let's say you park your car far in the parking lot. You're going to have to carry groceries to your car and then carry groceries from your car into your house. So imagine if you had kids at home and you're doing that during the week, maybe 3 times a week. That does help to build up some muscle. And most importantly, you want to look at minimizing the amount of time spent sitting. If you're at your office, you want to get up maybe every hour and walk around. Okay, that's going to also contribute to the 30 minutes in the day. But when you look at our society, we have to really go out of our way to be active, because technology has really robbed us of our activity that we would normally have. And it's especially worsened because of COVID. People being stuck in the house and not being able to go outside or exercise with friends or go to their gym. So you just want to be mindful of how often you're sitting, because people, for example, will drive to work, be commuting for an hour to work, commuting an hour back home, going to their office and sitting in front of a cute computer, getting back in the car and going through a drive-through. And when they get home, they might continue work at home on their computer, or have to check emails or help their kids with homework. So again, it's continuous sitting. So it's really an effort to be creative, to think about how you're going to get that activity in during the day. Okay. So I want to thank you for listening tonight.